Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Unexperienced Teachers podcast. Today we have another topic regarding lesson planning. And the question is, what is the best way to plan a class and do a lesson plan? Okay, so I think last week we had a class during practicum and we were given a handout. This is probably taken from a book, but I'm not sure. Yes, it is taken from a course book. And the handout was about everyday English, but specifically social expressions. And we were made to plan a lesson based on this handout, using its activities, and aside from that, also creating, for example, the learning outcomes, indicators, the contents, like listing them off, and also the activities. So,
Answering your question, Paloma, I am not very experienced at lesson planning, but um, the best way that suits me, and probably the best way that suits you as well, because we were already talked about this before, is the backwards planning or backwards lesson planning. So basically, as we had everything in this handout that Paloma already talked about, we started creating, for example, the learning objective.
mhm,
As far as we know, anyways, the backwards planning is based on like we have the assessment first. So as
mhm.
we know,
Like
or we set this assessment objective, then we start planning like
from the
backwards.
strongest activity,
Yeah,
which in our case was writing or creating a role play using the expressions and presenting it. That was like the strongest activity that we had outside of the handout. But however, it's still related to the handout. As for example, in the handout there are three activities, and the last one was to choose a line to continue the conversations. So, for example, if I say "pleased to meet you too," and the students were supposed to be like, "Hey, how are you? Pleased to meet you." And then the other one would go, "Pleased to meet you too. Uh, what's your name?" etc. Right?
yeah, exactly. So what we did was chose some sorry,
Contents.
choose some contents. Okay,
Hmm.
so they were perhaps pleasure, for example, afraid, lovely, cheers, excited. Keeping in mind that most of them are going to make more sense within a sentence, within an utterance, not just by themselves, but it's just for
Right.
us to um,
Know what the students like what vocabulary they should know by the end
know.
of the class,
Yeah.
right? We first of all, so we worked individually at first. We took a look at the handout, we took a look at the activities and the contents, of course, and basically we tried to figure out what the purpose of it was. And actually, after we worked individually and got in groups, we came to the same conclusion. I mean, regarding the learning outcome, we had basically everybody in the class, not just our group, the same learning outcome, which was uh, students will be able to use and answer with or to expressions in social situations, orally or in written. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So then it is very important when lesson planning is because it is a problem, like a common problem for all of us, like an issue when we are planning. So a very important content about this lesson planning, it's that we have to answer the question for functional content because it's been pain in the heck for all of us lately. Like maybe not nowadays because we got used to it, but however it was. So when we are talking about functional contents, we need to answer the question: what are they going to use this content for? Like the students, of course.
Yeah.
And in this case, we chose like students interact socially with people they know and don't. And why the functional content is so important? Because we need All of these, or the whole lesson planning, all these contents are interconnected, and the assessment part is interconnected with the objective, with the learning objectives, and how or what are they going to use it for.
Hmm.
So it is very important to keep that in mind and stack and learn it by heart, like answer the question.
Yeah, so basically, functional contents is like what the students are going to use the language for. It's like what we tell them. But they don't see the lesson plan.
Yeah.
We see it, but we also have the learning outcome.
Yeah, but that's
But
why we need to
yeah, but
keep it
the
as
functional
clear as possible.
content is like very much related to the learning outcome. It's what we show them. Like you are going to be able to talk to people, to interact in social situations. For example, when you go to a party or when you meet somebody in school, when you go to a restaurant and such, right? So you were talking about backwards planning.
Oh
Anything?
yeah, backwards planning, as I told you, is how we worked last lesson.
Yeah. So, I mean, in my experience, I feel a little bit confident in my lesson planning, but at first it was definitely hard for all of us.
Yeah,
Currently, we're in fourth year. We have been studying 3 years, right?
yeah, so far.
And we still like feel maybe not so confident, but like have like this little bit of like I don't know how to say like knowledge, but like we're still trying to understand it. And one like basically technique we have been using for a little while, which makes it easier for us, is backwards planning, which
Yeah.
is going from the biggest activity and then basing the whole lesson on that.
And I was wondering, like, do you think that there is uh like one uh like champion of this lesson planning and stuff? Like, do you think that it will depends on the person that is going to use way to lesson planning, or there is like a kind of a recipe?
No, in my opinion, I don't believe there is like a square recipe to have like the most perfect lesson plan. Like it all comes with experience, right? But as we are like studying currently, we have also like checked techniques. We have practiced a lot. We have gone to practicum like at school, but we also have had some experience using like tools online that make, for example, and this is like something hard for us, at least at the beginning of the career, to create learning outcomes. That was so hard.
It
People
wasn't it.
struggled a lot with it, but then we practiced a lot and we checked like web pages online that basically you put in the contents and an action, for example, and then the page wrote it for you. I mean, you put everything in it, but it wrote it for you, right, as a learning outcome. And so, well, no, there isn't a recipe, and everybody is different. So there are different things that will work for some people. Maybe for you it won't, but you will find your own way of
And
lesson
also there are
planning.
different lesson plans styles, like
Yeah, like Clill, for
templates
example.
or
Yeah, templates. That's very
yeah.
useful. When we started studying, we had no idea what to do. They were like, "Okay, make a lesson plan," and we are like, "Oh my god, what do we do?"
Yeah,
Right?
there were plenty of them on the internet, and we were like,
I don't
what
understand
did she do?
anything. Yeah, no, but then we have like some reinforcement classes, and we definitely understood more.
Yeah.
And as we keep practicing, we're gonna keep understanding more and more until we finally find like our own recipe, so to speak. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important, another important part, not the most important one, is, as I said before, we have to interconnect the assessment with the learning objective and also the activities. If
I
we
have a thought.
don't, oh yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, but it's like a final thought. You can keep going.
Oh, No, as simple as it is. Like we have to interconnect that, and that is kind of a triage to say somehow. So we have the learning objectives, we have the assessment part, how we are going to basically assess the students, and also the activities that we are presented that are going to allow students to achieve the goal. So yeah.
Yeah. So this is like my final thought that I thought about it before, but I didn't mention it because I forgot. So the last thing I wanted to say in this episode is that uh, when you when you are able to come up with a learning outcome, I feel like that's the guiding point, right? That's like the pivot. Uh, such a good word. That's the pivot of like a lesson plan. That's like the whole reason.
The cornerstone.
Yeah, right, like the foundation of a lesson plan with the learning outcome, which is we had well, students will be able to answer to social expressions in social situations, right? And our like strongest activity is like definitely strongly related to it, which is the students create a role play using these social expressions and then they present it. It's like everything in the lesson plan is based on the learning outcome and the strongest activity, right? Yep, that's it. Anything else to add?
Please type in the comments if you have questions, doubts, if you want to add something to this podcast or to this episode, so we can um tune. No,
So we
what was it?
can what? I mean, leave your comments.
Yes.
We will be checking them. We don't get many comments.
No, but
For now, we haven't. But we will be checking them in case you have any questions, any ideas. We'll be checking them and answering them. Maybe.
yeah.
Okay, so that was it for today's episode of the Unexperienced Teachers
It's just
Podcast.
podcast.
Thank you for listening.
Bye. See you
Goodbye.
around.
See you. Soon there will be another episode.